The screams of the dying ship echoed through its corridors as Captain Marcus Chen raced toward the escape pods, his wife Alara stumbling behind him with their newborn son clutched tightly to her chest. The baby's cries were lost in the cacophony of alarms and the distant sounds of the Valerian attack ships that had ambushed their colony transport. "We're not going to make it," Alara gasped, her face pale with fear and exhaustion. She had given birth just 3 days ago, and now their dream of a new life on Epsilon Prime was dissolving into nightmare. Marcus glanced back at her, his eyes reflecting the emergency lights that pulsed along the corridor. "We will. I promise you." A violent explosion rocked the ship, sending them both crashing against the bulkhead. The baby wailed louder, his tiny face red with distress. "The main engines," Marcus muttered, helping Alara to her feet. "They're tearing us apart." They reached the escape pod bay to find chaos. Most of the pods had already launched, and desperate colonists fought for the remaining few. Marcus pushed through the crowd, shielding his family with his body until they reached the second-to-last pod. "Get in," he ordered, activating the entry sequence. The pod's door slid open with a hiss, revealing a tiny space barely large enough for 2 adults. Alara hesitated, looking at the crowd of colonists still waiting. "Marcus, we can't." "Now, Alara." His voice was harsh with fear. "Think of Noah." At the mention of their son's name, Alara's resolve hardened. She climbed into the pod, cradling Noah against her. Marcus was about to follow when a secondary explosion sent a piece of debris crashing down on him. Pain exploded through his leg as he fell. "Marcus!" Alara screamed, reaching for him. He knew instantly that his leg was broken. Blood soaked through his colony uniform, and the pain was blinding. More importantly, he saw the structural integrity warnings flashing on the bay's status panels. They had minutes, maybe less. "I can't make it," he said, his voice suddenly calm as he accepted the truth. "But you can. Both of you." "No." Alara tried to climb out, but Marcus pushed her back, his hand gentle but firm on her shoulder. "Listen to me. The pod is calibrated for an adult and infant weight. It won't have enough fuel to reach safety with all 3 of us." "I don't care." "But I do." Marcus looked down at his son, memorizing the tiny features. "You're going to live, Noah. You're going to grow up strong." With a swift movement, he reached inside the pod and activated the launch sequence, then withdrew his hand as the safety protocols engaged. "I love you both," he said as the pod door began to close. "Marcus, no." Alara's scream was cut off as the door sealed. The last thing Marcus saw was his wife's tear-streaked face pressed against the viewport, their son clutched to her chest. Then the pod ejected, and he was alone in the dying ship. He dragged himself to a viewport in time to see the tiny pod shooting away from the massive colony ship. Then the Valerian vessels came into view, enormous, predatory shapes with wing-like solar collectors extending from their hulls. They resembled nothing so much as ancient beasts of prey. Marcus watched as one of the smaller Valerian ships changed course, moving to intercept the escape pod. "No," he whispered, knowing he was witnessing the last moments of his family's life. But then something unexpected happened. The Valerian ship didn't fire. Instead, it extended a capture field, gently enveloping the pod. Marcus had just enough time to feel a surge of confused hope before the colony ship's engines reached critical failure, and his world vanished in fire and light. The Valerian ship Talon of Dawn pulled away from the exploding human vessel, the small escape pod secured in its capture bay. Fleet Commander Corvin watched from the bridge as the human colony ship disintegrated, its fragments scattering across the void. "A clean operation," his second-in-command, Vex, observed. "The warlord will be pleased." Corvin made a soft clicking sound with his beak-like mouth, the Valerian equivalent of a contemplative hum. "Perhaps, though I question the wisdom of attacking a human colony ship. They are not our enemies. They encroached on territories the warlord has claimed," Vex replied, his feathered crest rising slightly in disapproval at Corvin's apparent hesitation. "The message must be clear. These star systems belong to the Valerian Dominion." Corvin didn't respond. He had served in the Dominion fleet for nearly 30 cycles and had seen the Valerian territories expand across 3 sectors of space. Under Warlord Razix, that expansion had become more aggressive, more indiscriminate. It troubled him. "Commander," a communications officer interrupted, "we've captured a single escape pod." Life signs detect 2 humans aboard. Corvin's amber eyes narrowed. Survivors? Bring them to the holding bay. I will inspect them myself. Vex's wings rustled with disapproval. Standard protocol is to space any survivors, Commander. I am aware of protocol, Second Vex, Corvin replied coldly. But I will determine their fate. He swept from the bridge, his ceremonial wings, metal-enhanced extensions of his natural wings that marked his rank, gleaming in the ship's lighting. Volarians were an avian species, standing nearly 7 feet tall, with powerful, streamlined bodies covered in feathers that ranged from deep blue to purple. Their arms ended in taloned hands, and vestigial wings sprouted from their backs, symbolic remnants of their evolutionary past when their ancestors soared through the skies of their homeworld. In the holding bay, Corvin found a medical technician already examining the escape pod's occupants. The first was a human female, unconscious but alive, with minor injuries from the rough ejection. The second was what made Corvin freeze in surprise. A human infant, impossibly small and fragile-looking, lay wrapped in a thermal blanket. Unlike its mother, it was conscious and alert, its tiny eyes darting around at the towering Volarians surrounding it. It made a small sound, not a cry of fear, but almost a coo of curiosity. It's a hatchling, the medical technician said unnecessarily. Very recently born, according to my scans. Corvin approached cautiously. He had never seen a human child before, let alone one so young. The Volarian Dominion had limited contact with humans, mostly territorial disputes and the occasional trade negotiation. Human reproduction was a mystery to most of his kind. The infant looked at him directly, and Corvin felt an unexpected jolt. There was something in those eyes, a clarity, an awareness that seemed impossible in a creature so new to existence. Then the baby began to cry, a sound that pierced Corvin's sensitive hearing and seemed to echo through the holding bay. The Volarians present rustled their wings in discomfort. "Silence it," ordered Vex, who had followed Corvin down from the bridge. The medical technician reached toward the infant uncertainly, but Corvin moved first. With a gentleness that surprised even himself, he lifted the tiny human, remembering how Volarian parents would cradle their own hatchlings. The baby's cries softened, then stopped as it regarded Corvin with what seemed like fascination. "Commander, what are you doing?" Vex's voice was sharp with disapproval. Corvin didn't immediately answer. He was captivated by the small being in his hands, so defenseless, yet so full of potential. In Volarian culture, the birth of a child was sacred, celebrated across entire communities. To harm a hatchling was considered the gravest of crimes. "We will not harm them," Corvin said finally, his voice leaving no room for argument. "The mother will be treated for her injuries. The child," he paused, still holding the infant. "The child is under my personal protection. The warlord will not approve," Vex warned. "Then I will answer to the warlord," Corvin replied simply. As if understanding the significance of the moment, the baby reached out a tiny hand and grasped one of Corvin's talons. The gesture, so trusting and innocent, sealed Corvin's resolve. Little did he know that this single act of mercy would alter the course of galactic history. On the Volarian homeworld of Altrax Prime, Warlord Razix reclined on his throne, his ceremonial wings, far larger and more elaborate than Corvin's, spread in an ostentatious display of authority. The throne room was a cavernous space designed to intimidate, with high ceilings that allowed the warlord to fly to a raised perch when he wished to literally look down upon his subjects. "So," Razix said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble, "you defied standard protocol and brought human survivors to our homeworld." His gaze shifted to where Alara stood, still weak from her ordeal but defiant, holding Noah protectively against her chest. Corvin stood at attention, his posture perfect but unapologetic. "I exercised my authority as fleet commander to make a field decision, Warlord. The survivors pose no threat, and the child is a hatchling." Razix's feathers ruffled in irritation. "A human hatchling, Corvin, not one of our own. All young life is sacred," Corvin replied firmly. "That is our most ancient law." The warlord couldn't argue with this point. It was indeed one of the foundational principles of Volarian society, predating even their spacefaring era. The protection of the young, regardless of circumstances, was ingrained in their cultural DNA. "And what do you propose we do with them?" Razix asked, his talons clicking against the arm of his throne. Return them to human space? Allow them to report our activities in the disputed territories. The woman has knowledge and skills that could be useful, Corvin said carefully. She was a biotechnician on the colony ship, specializing in agricultural adaptation for new worlds. Razix leaned forward slightly, his interest piqued despite his annoyance. The Dominion had been experiencing crop failures on several recently settled worlds, and human expertise in adaptive agriculture was well known. And the child? The warlord pressed. Corvin hesitated only briefly. I request permission to take responsibility for the human child under the right of guardian wings. A murmur ran through the court. The right of guardian wings was an ancient Valerian custom wherein an adult could claim responsibility for an orphan child, not quite adoption in the human sense, but a solemn oath to protect and guide. Razix's eyes widened in genuine surprise. You would invoke the right for a human? The child's father died defending their escape pod, Corvin said. By our traditions, that makes him a warrior worthy of respect. His offspring deserves no less. Alara watched this exchange with mounting confusion and hope. She understood little of the Valerian language, but the tone and body language suggested that the tall commander, the one who had first held Noah with such unexpected gentleness, was advocating for them. Finally, Razix made a sharp, decisive gesture with one hand. The woman may remain as an agricultural advisor, under supervision. And you, Commander Corvin, may exercise the right of guardian wings for the human child. His eyes narrowed. But know this, you alone will bear responsibility for any consequences. Corvin bowed deeply, his ceremonial wings dipping in acknowledgement. I understand and accept, Warlord. Later, in the quarters assigned to Alara, Corvin attempted to explain the arrangement with the help of a translation device. Your son will be raised here, among us, he told her. You will be permitted to see him regularly, but he will be educated in our ways. Alara clutched Noah tighter, her eyes filling with tears. You're taking my baby from me? Corvin's feathers drooped slightly in what Alara would later learn was an expression of sympathy. Not taking, protecting. If the warlord believed you could simply raise him alone, in isolation from our society, he would never have permitted either of you to live. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice breaking. Why save us at all? Corvin was silent for a moment, his amber eyes fixed on the sleeping infant. There is something about him, he said finally. Something I cannot explain. When he first looked at me, he trailed off, seeming embarrassed by his own sentimentality. Alara studied the alien commander, noticing for the first time the intricate patterns in his feathers, the intelligence in his eyes. Whatever his reasons, he had saved her son's life, and her own. His name is Noah, she said softly. Noah, Corvin repeated, the name awkward but carefully pronounced. In our tongue, the closest meaning would be one who journeys. It is a good name. Alara nodded, tears streaming down her face. His father wanted him to grow up strong. And so he shall, Corvin promised. This I swear by my wings and honor. And thus began Noah's strange childhood among the winged warriors of the Valerian Dominion. While his mother worked in the agricultural research facilities, Noah was raised in Corvin's household, learning the ways of a culture not his own. The early years were difficult for Alara, though she saw Noah regularly. Watching him absorb Valerian language, customs, and values was a constant reminder of all they had lost. She kept Marcus's memory alive for her son through stories and the few personal items she had managed to bring in the escape pod. A family holograph, Marcus's wedding band, a small data crystal containing family records. Noah grew into a curious, energetic child who moved between two worlds. With his mother, he learned human history, language, and culture. With Corvin, he studied Valerian martial traditions, philosophy, and the complex dynamics of their society. The Valerians, for their part, didn't quite know what to make of the human child in their midst. Some viewed him with curiosity, others with suspicion or disdain. But Corvin's status protected Noah from overt hostility, and over time, his quick intelligence and adaptability began to win respect. By his 10th year, Noah had grown tall for a human child, though still small compared to the Valerians. He moved with a grace that came from years of training under Corvin's tutelage, and he had developed a keen understanding of both his birth culture and his adopted one. It was in this year that Warlord Razix summoned Noah to his presence for the first time since his arrival on Altrax Prime. The throne room was just as intimidating as Alara remembered, though she now understood more of the symbolic elements. The height representing the sky domains of ancient Valerian hunting grounds, the blue-purple color scheme echoing the plumage of the ruling bloodline. Noah stood straight and unafraid before the warlord, having been coached by Corvin on the proper protocols. Alara and Corvin flanked him, both tense with apprehension. "So," Razix said, studying Noah with unnerving intensity, "this is the human child who cried among us." The translation device rendered his words in crisp, accentless standard human. Noah executed a perfect Valerian bow. "I am honored by your attention, great warlord," he replied in flawless Valerian. Razix's feathers rippled in surprise. He had not expected the human to speak their language so well. "You have been taught our ways," he observed. "Guardian Corvin has instructed me in the honor and traditions of the Valerian people," Noah confirmed, "as my mother has taught me of my human heritage." The warlord's gaze shifted briefly to Alara, who had also learned to speak passable Valerian over the years. "And what do you think of our ways, human child?" Noah didn't hesitate. "They are different from human ways, but equally valid. Both cultures value strength, honor, and the protection of their people. Both have blind spots and wisdom." A murmur ran through the court at the child's boldness. Razix himself seemed taken aback, then let out a sound that might have been a laugh. "You speak candidly for one so young," the warlord said. "Guardian Corvin has taught me that truth is a warrior's greatest weapon," Noah replied. Razix studied the boy for a long moment, then made a decisive gesture with one taloned hand. "The experiment has yielded interesting results, Commander Corvin. The human child will begin formal education at the War Academy with the next cycle of cadets." Corvin bowed deeply. "A great honor, warlord." Alara felt her heart sink. The War Academy was the most prestigious institution on Altrax Prime, training the future military leaders of the Dominion. It was also notoriously demanding and dangerous. "My son is only 10 years old," she protested, unable to stay silent. Razix's piercing gaze turned to her. "Young by human standards, perhaps, but he has been raised in Valerian ways. If he is to have a place among us, he must prove his worth like any other." Later, in the privacy of their quarters, Alara confronted Corvin. "He's just a boy. The Academy will destroy him. They're all going to be bigger, stronger, with natural advantages he can never have." Corvin's feathers lay flat against his body in what Alara now recognized as a sign of determination. "Noah is stronger than you know, Alara. Not in the same way as a Valerian youth, but in ways that may surprise everyone." "They'll hurt him," she insisted, tears of frustration in her eyes. "Yes," Corvin agreed simply. "They will try, and he will learn to overcome. It is the only way he can survive in this world." Alara wanted to argue further, but she knew Corvin was right. In the decades since their arrival, she had seen the Dominion grow more militaristic, more expansionist under Razix's rule. Noah existed in a precarious position, tolerated because of Corvin's influence, but always an outsider. "Then we need to prepare him," she said finally. And prepare him they did. For the months before his entry into the academy, Noah underwent intensive training. Alara used her knowledge of human biology to help him build strength and endurance beyond what might be expected for his age. Corvin taught him advanced combat techniques adapted for his smaller stature. When the day came for Noah to join the academy, he stood at the massive entrance gates, looking impossibly small next to the young Valerians who would be his classmates. Alara hugged him fiercely, trying to memorize the feel of him in her arms, terrified it might be the last time. "Remember who you are," she whispered. "Both sides of you." Corvin placed a ceremonial training talon, a metal claw extension used by Valerian warriors, in Noah's hand. "Intelligence before strength," he said, repeating their training mantra. "Adaptability before power." Noah nodded, his young face solemn but determined. "I won't fail you," he promised them both. As he walked through the gates of the academy, neither Alara nor Corvin could have predicted just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The first year at the academy was brutal. Noah was constantly challenged, frequently humiliated, and occasionally injured. The young Valerians saw him as an interloper, a curiosity at best, and an insult to their traditions at worst. But what Noah lacked in natural strength and size, he made up for in quickness, adaptability, and sheer stubborn determination. Where Valerian cadets relied on their natural advantages, Noah analyzed, adapted, and overcame. He studied his opponents, identified patterns and weaknesses, and developed techniques that used his differences as strengths rather than liabilities. By the end of his second year, he had earned a grudging respect from both instructors and fellow cadets. By the fourth year, he was regularly besting opponents in combat simulations through superior strategy and unexpected tactics. One instructor, a grizzled veteran named Tarek, took a particular interest in Noah's development. "You fight like no Valerian," he told Noah after observing a particularly impressive victory over a cadet twice his size. "But perhaps that is exactly why you win." Noah, now 14 and growing into a lanky adolescent, had learned to take such comments as compliments. Guardian Corvin says that being underestimated is an advantage in itself. Tarek made a clicking sound of amusement. Corvin always was too clever for his own good. Perhaps that's why he saw something in you that others missed. As Noah progressed through the academy, tensions between the Dominion and the human territories continued to escalate. Razix's expansionist policies had led to several outright conflicts, though nothing yet approaching full-scale war. Noah found himself in an increasingly difficult position, loyal to his Valerian upbringing, but troubled by the aggression against his birth species. He maintained a careful neutrality in political discussions, focusing instead on his studies and training. It was during his final year at the academy that everything changed. A diplomatic summit was arranged between Dominion representatives and a coalition of human worlds, hosted on a neutral space station. Commander Corvin, now elevated to the position of strategic advisor to the warlord, was selected to lead the Valerian delegation. To everyone's surprise, Corvin requested that Noah, now 17 and at the top of his academy class, accompany him as an aide. "The boy has no diplomatic training," Razix objected during the mission briefing. "He has something more valuable," Corvin countered. "A foot in both worlds. He understands human thinking in ways none of us can, yet he knows our ways as well. He will be an asset." Reluctantly, Razix agreed, though his amber eyes narrowed with suspicion. "See that your human project doesn't become a liability, Corvin." Noah, standing at perfect attention during this exchange, betrayed no emotion. Years at the academy had taught him to mask his feelings behind a stoic exterior. Inside, however, his mind raced with implications. This would be his first contact with humans other than his mother since infancy. Alara was both proud and terrified when Noah told her of the assignment. "Be careful," she warned him as they said their goodbyes. "The humans will see you as a curiosity at best, a traitor at worst." "And Razix?" She hesitated. "You think the warlord has ulterior motives for allowing me on this mission?" Noah finished for her. Alara nodded. "He's never fully trusted you, or Corvin for saving us." "I'll be vigilant," Noah promised. The diplomatic mission departed for the neutral station with a small honor guard of Valerian warriors. During the journey, Corvin briefed Noah on the expected protocols and the issues to be negotiated, primarily territorial disputes and navigation rights in contested systems. What neither of them anticipated was the reaction Noah would receive from the human delegation. When the Valerian party entered the main conference chamber of the space station, the humans present fell into a shocked silence at the sight of Noah. Though he wore Valerian diplomatic attire, adapted for his human physique, there was no mistaking what he was. "Is this some kind of joke?" demanded the lead human negotiator, Ambassador Chun of the Terran Alliance. Corvin stepped forward, his ceremonial wings gleaming under the station's lights. "This is Noah, my ward and diplomatic aide. He was raised in the Dominion after his parents' colony ship was damaged in an incident." "Incident?" Ambassador Chin's voice rose in anger. "You mean after Valerian forces attacked an unarmed colony ship?" Noah stepped forward, deliberately placing himself between Corvin and the increasingly hostile human delegation. "Ambassador Chun," he said in perfect, unaccented standard human, "I understand your surprise at my presence. I assure you, I am here to help facilitate understanding between our peoples." The ambassador stared at him, clearly taken aback by Noah's fluent speech and calm demeanor. "Who are you?" he asked more quietly. "How did you come to be with them?" "A long story," Noah replied diplomatically. "One I would be happy to share in a less formal setting." For now, perhaps we could focus on the matters at hand. The human delegation reluctantly agreed, though they continued to cast suspicious glances at Noah throughout the initial session. When the formal talks adjourned for the day, Ambassador Chen approached Noah privately. "I'd like to hear that story now," he said. Noah nodded, having expected this. "Of course, Ambassador." They moved to a small observation lounge overlooking the stars. Noah recounted his history truthfully but carefully, emphasizing Corvin's protection and the complexity of his dual identity. "So you consider yourself Valerian?" Chen asked when Noah had finished. Noah considered the question seriously. "I consider myself both, Ambassador. I have lived among the Valerians, been educated in their ways, and owe my life to Commander Corvin. But I am human by birth, and my mother has ensured I never forgot that heritage." "Your mother? She's still alive? Still with the Valerians?" Noah nodded. "She works in agricultural research. Her expertise has helped several Valerian colony worlds overcome crop failures." Chen's expression was difficult to read. "And you've never wanted to return to human space? To live among your own kind?" "My own kind," Noah repeated softly. "That phrase is more complicated for me than for most, Ambassador. But to answer your question, I've often wondered about the human worlds. My mother's stories paint them as both familiar and alien to me." What Noah didn't share with the ambassador was the growing unease he felt about the mission. Something in Razix's manner before their departure, coupled with the unusually small size of their diplomatic party, had triggered his instincts. The warlord was playing a deeper game, and Noah wasn't sure what his role in it was meant to be. His suspicions were confirmed that night when he accessed the secure communication logs of their ship, a skill he had acquired during special operations training at the academy but had never revealed to his superiors. Hidden among the routine messages was an encrypted communication from Razix to the captain of a Dominion battlecruiser, ordering it to a position just outside the neutral zone near the station. Noah sat in his quarters, staring at the decoded message, faced with the first true test of his divided heritage. Razix was positioning military assets for a potential strike, using the diplomatic mission as cover, perhaps even as hostages or as an excuse if things went wrong. Should he warn Corvin? The commander had been his guardian, his mentor, the closest thing to a father he had known since infancy. But would Corvin's loyalty to the Dominion outweigh his sense of honor? Or should he alert the humans? They were his birth people, innocent of the deception being planned against them. But such an act would be an irreversible betrayal of the culture that had raised him. As the station's artificial night cycle deepened around him, Noah made his decision. He would protect both sides from Razix's machinations, not by choosing between them, but by forcing a third path. The diplomatic talks the next day proceeded with superficial cordiality, but Noah could sense the undercurrents of tension. The human delegation was pushing hard on territorial concessions that Corvin was not authorized to make. Meanwhile, Noah knew the Dominion battlecruiser was moving steadily closer. During a recess, Noah approached Corvin privately. "We need to talk," he said in low Valerian. "Somewhere secure." Corvin's amber eyes narrowed, but he nodded and led Noah to a small maintenance corridor where they were unlikely to be overheard or monitored. "What troubles you, my ward?" Corvin asked once they were alone. Noah took a deep breath. "The Nightwing battlecruiser has been ordered to position near the station, on Razix's direct command." Corvin's feathers flattened against his body in shock. "How do you know this?" "That's not important," Noah replied. "What matters is what it means. Razix never intended these talks to succeed. He's positioning for a military strike, or at least the threat of one." The commander was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable to anyone who hadn't spent years learning to interpret Valerian micro-expressions. But Noah saw the conflicting emotions: shock, anger, and a deep weariness. "You should not have accessed secure communications," Corvin said finally, but there was no real admonishment in his tone. "Would you have preferred to be blindsided?" Noah asked. "To have your honor compromised when Razix springs whatever trap he's setting?" Corvin made a soft clicking sound. "You speak boldly for one so young." "I had a good teacher," Noah replied. "One who taught me that true honor sometimes requires difficult choices." The commander regarded him with what might have been pride. "And what choice would you make now, Noah?" "Neither betrayal nor blind obedience," Noah said firmly. "We find a third path." As the diplomatic session reconvened, Noah took his place slightly behind Corvin, his mind racing with calculations and contingencies. The tension in the room had ratcheted higher, with both delegations clearly frustrated by the lack of progress. Ambassador Chun was in the middle of a particularly pointed statement about Valerian incursions when Noah's communicator vibrated with an incoming message. He glanced down discreetly and saw it was from the Valerian ship, an automated alert that the Nightwing battle cruiser had arrived and was demanding that the diplomatic vessel clear the station for emergency extraction. It was happening faster than Noah had anticipated. He caught Corvin's eye and gave a subtle signal they had developed during mission training. The commander acknowledged with an almost imperceptible nod, then raised a hand to interrupt the ambassador. "If I may," Corvin said, his voice carrying the formal tones of Valerian diplomatic speech. "I believe we have been approaching these negotiations from an adversarial perspective that serves neither of our peoples. Perhaps a different framework is needed." The human ambassador looked surprised but nodded for Corvin to continue. "My aide has prepared an alternative proposal," Corvin continued, gesturing to Noah. "One that draws on both Valerian and human diplomatic traditions." This was not what they had discussed in the maintenance corridor, but Noah understood immediately what Corvin was doing, creating an opening for him. He stepped forward, aware of all eyes on him. "Thank you, Commander," he said, then addressed the entire gathering. "Honorable representatives, I stand before you as someone who exists between your worlds. Raised by a Valerian guardian but born human, I have a unique perspective on this conflict." Noah paused, noting that he had everyone's complete attention now. What neither side has acknowledged is that this dispute is not truly about the territories in question, but about fear. The Dominion fears human expansion will threaten their security. Humanity fears Valerian military superiority. Ambassador Chen frowned. "That's an oversimplification." "With respect, Ambassador," Noah interrupted, "it is the essence of the matter. And there is something else both sides should know." He took a deep breath. "A Dominion battlecruiser has just arrived near this station." Gasps and angry exclamations erupted from the human delegation. The Valerians in the room looked shocked, with several turning accusatory gazes toward Corvin. "I did not order this," Corvin stated firmly. "Nor was I informed. It was ordered directly by Warlord Razix," Noah confirmed. Without the knowledge of this delegation, Ambassador Chen rose to his feet, face flushed with anger. "This is an outrage. A violation of neutral space and diplomatic protocol." "Yes," Noah agreed calmly. "It is. And now we have a choice. We can allow this provocation to end these talks and perhaps spark a wider conflict. Or we can demonstrate that Valerians and humans are capable of something better." A heavy silence fell over the room. Noah could feel the weight of the moment, the precarious balance between conflict and possibility. "What do you propose?" Chen asked finally. Noah looked to Corvin, who gave him a slight nod to continue. "A joint communication from both delegations, refusing the battle cruiser's demand for extraction and reaffirming our commitment to these negotiations, followed by a framework agreement that acknowledges the legitimate security concerns of both sides." It was bold, possibly even reckless. Noah was effectively suggesting that Corvin defy his warlord's implicit orders. The commander was silent for a long moment, aware that his next words would define his legacy. Then he straightened to his full impressive height, his ceremonial wings spreading slightly. "I support this proposal," he said clearly. "As the appointed representative of the Dominion, I have the authority to continue these negotiations as I see fit. The presence of military assets without diplomatic clearance is not only a violation of protocol, but of Valerian honor." One of the junior Valerian diplomats made a sound of protest, but Corvin silenced him with a look. Ambassador Chen studied both Corvin and Noah, his expression guarded but thoughtful. "And you believe you can make Warlord Razix accept whatever agreement we reach here?" "I believe," Corvin replied carefully, "that an honorable agreement that truly addresses both sides' concerns will be difficult for even the warlord to reject openly." What followed were 3 days of the most intense negotiations Noah had ever witnessed. He found himself in the unique position of being trusted by neither side fully, yet needed by both. He moved between the delegations, translating not just words but concepts, finding areas of common ground where others saw only conflict. On the 4th day, they emerged with what would later be known as the Neutral Station Accords, a framework agreement that established clear territorial boundaries, mutual security guarantees, and a joint council to address future disputes. Throughout this process, the Nightwing battlecruiser remained in position outside the station, a constant reminder of the stakes. Noah knew that once they returned to Valerian space, Corvin would face severe consequences for his defiance, and Noah himself might be deemed a traitor. As the final documents were being prepared for formal signing, Noah received an encrypted message on his personal communicator. It was from his mother, sent through back channels she had developed over the years working in Valerian research facilities. Razix mobilizing full fleet. Return expected in 2 days. Preparing purge of disloyal elements. Be careful, my son. Noah's blood ran cold. The warlord wasn't just planning to reprimand Corvin. He was preparing a full political purge, and possibly something worse. The treaty they had worked so hard to create might be dismissed as the product of treasonous weakness, setting relations back to the brink of war. He had to act, but what could one 17-year-old do against the might of the Valerian Dominion? The answer came to him as he watched Ambassador Chun and Corvin formally sign the accords, their vastly different hands, one human, one taloned and feathered, pressing biometric seals to the document side by side. Unity, not just between species, but among all those who valued peace over power. That night, Noah sent messages to everyone he trusted within the Dominion, fellow Academy graduates who had respected his abilities, instructors who had recognized his potential, even a few high-ranking officials who had quietly expressed concerns about Razix's increasingly aggressive policies. He did not call for rebellion or betrayal. Instead, he simply shared the truth, that Razix had attempted to sabotage legitimate diplomatic efforts, that he was preparing to purge those who sought peace, that the future of both humans and Valerians might depend on standing together against warmongers on both sides. Then, knowing that his actions would likely prevent him from ever returning to the only home he had known, Noah approached Ambassador Chun with a request. I need a direct communication channel to Terran Alliance High Command, he said without preamble. Chun raised an eyebrow. That's not something I can provide to a member of the Valerian Diplomatic Corps, Noah. I'm not asking as a Valerian diplomat, Noah replied. I'm asking as a human who wants to prevent an interspecies war. The ambassador studied him for a long moment. What are you planning? Something audacious, Noah admitted. And I'll need human cooperation to make it work. When the Valerian diplomatic vessel departed the station the next day, Noah was conspicuously absent. Corvin, understanding what his ward was attempting, covered for him as long as possible, claiming that Noah was gathering last-minute intelligence from human sources. In reality, Noah was aboard a human scout ship, racing ahead of the Valerian vessel, carrying vital information to both human authorities and his Valerian contacts. His plan was simple in concept, but breathtakingly complex in execution, to create a unified front of moderates from both species before Razix could consolidate his position. By the time the diplomatic vessel reached Valerian space, events were already in motion. A coalition of high-ranking Valerian officials, including several fleet commanders who had served with Corvin, had presented formal objections to Razix's leadership before the Ancient Council, the rarely convened body of elders that could, in theory, override even the warlord's authority. Simultaneously, the Terran Alliance had publicly embraced the neutral station accords, presenting them not as a victory over the Valerians, but as a mutual achievement that benefited both species. Razix, caught off guard by the speed and coordination of these moves, found himself in the unprecedented position of facing internal challenge just as he was preparing to assert his absolute authority. When the diplomatic vessel arrived, instead of being able to arrest Corvin as a traitor, the warlord was forced to receive him formally as the successful negotiator of an officially recognized treaty. Noah, meanwhile, had returned to Valerian space aboard a small, unmarked vessel, moving secretly between his mother's research facility and the gathering coalition of peace-minded officials. His unique position, neither fully human nor fully Valerian, allowed him to speak hard truths that others could not, to bridge divides that had seemed insurmountable. The crisis came to a head 3 weeks after the signing of the accords. Razix, realizing that his position was weakening, attempted a desperate power grab. He ordered loyal fleet elements to key positions around the Dominion capital, preparing to arrest the ancient council members and anyone who had expressed support for the treaty. What he didn't know was that Noah had anticipated this move. Through his academy connections, he had cultivated sources within Razix's inner circle, including junior officers who saw the warlord's increasingly erratic behavior as a threat to the Dominion itself. As Razix's forces moved into position, they found themselves countermanded by their own subordinates. Communication systems mysteriously failed, navigation data became corrupted, and in the confusion, the Ancient Council convened an emergency session broadcast across the entire Dominion. For the first time in Valerian history, a human stood before the Ancient Council. Noah, now 18, addressed the assembled elders in formal High Valerian, the ceremonial language used only for the most solemn occasions. Honored ancestors of the sky, he began, using the traditional address. I stand before you as both outsider and child of your customs. I have been raised in the ways of the Dominion, yet I was born of another people. This dual heritage has been both burden and blessing. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the council. It has allowed me to see what others cannot, that the path of endless conquest leads only to mutual destruction, that the differences between our species are dwarfed by what we share, that the true strength of the Valerian people lies not in domination, but in the honor and wisdom your ancestors encoded in your most ancient laws. The council chamber was utterly silent as Noah continued, outlining the evidence of Razix's attempts to undermine the peace process, his planned purge of loyal Valerians who sought only the Dominion's true welfare, and finally, his attempted coup against the council itself. When he finished, one of the eldest council members rose slowly to her feet, her once magnificent wings now reduced to delicate, age-thinned membranes. In all my centuries, she said, her voice carrying surprising strength, I have never heard a non-Valerian speak our ceremonial tongue with such precision, nor have I witnessed such courage from one so young. She turned to her fellow council members. The human child who once cried among us has become a bridge between worlds. Perhaps this is the path the stars have set before us. The council's decision was unanimous. Razix was removed from power, his position given temporarily to a triumvirate that included Corvin. The neutral station accords were formally ratified as Dominion law, and Noah, to his astonishment, was granted a title never before bestowed on a non-Valerian, Starwing diplomat, a formal recognition of his unique status as an intermediary between species. In the cycles that followed, Noah worked tirelessly to strengthen the fragile peace. He traveled between human and Valerian worlds, established cultural exchange programs, and helped create joint scientific missions that benefited both species. His mother, Alara, became the head of a prestigious cross-species agricultural research institute, developing crop varieties that thrived on both human and Valerian colony worlds. Corvin, eventually elected to the permanent position of High Commander, remained Noah's mentor and friend. Together, they navigated the complex waters of interspecies politics, weathering crises and celebrating breakthroughs. By his 30th year, Noah had become a legend in both human and Valerian space, the orphaned human child raised among winged beasts who had grown to forge an unprecedented peace. Humans called him the ambassador of two worlds. Valerians used a more poetic term, Skybridge. But it was on his 35th birthday, during a ceremony marking the 15th anniversary of the Neutral Station Accords, that Noah received his most enduring title. The ceremony was held on a newly constructed space station positioned exactly halfway between human and Valerian space, a physical embodiment of the cooperation Noah had helped foster. Representatives from dozens of worlds, human, Valerian, and several other species who had since joined the growing alliance, gathered to commemorate the peace. As Noah stepped forward to address the assembly, an elderly Valerian rose from his seat. It was Tarek, Noah's former combat instructor at the academy, now well into his final years. I remember, Tarek said, his voice carrying in the sudden silence, a small human boy who stepped into my training hall, looking so fragile among our warrior youth. We all thought he would break. The old instructor's feathers rustled with amusement. Instead, he taught us new ways to be strong. Tarek turned to Noah, performing a formal wingspread salute that was typically reserved for the highest military honors. Once, a human baby cried among us, and we wondered what to make of him. Today, he stands as the architect of a peace that spans the stars. The old warrior bowed deeply. Today, I name him Lord of the Stars, not through conquest, but through the greatest victory of all, unity. The title spread rapidly throughout both human and Valerian territories, eventually becoming Noah's most common honorific. The Lord of the Stars, a reminder that the most unlikely beginnings can lead to the most extraordinary destinies. Years later, when Noah was asked by a young Valerian student how he had accomplished so much from such humble beginnings, he smiled and gave an answer that would be inscribed on monuments throughout human and Valerian space. I was raised by two worlds and belonged fully to neither. That space between, that void that might have been loneliness, became instead a bridge. We are all more than the circumstances of our birth. We are what we choose to become, and the connections we forge across the divides that seem to separate us. The orphaned human child who had once cried among winged aliens had indeed become the Lord of the Stars, not through conquest or domination, but by finding strength in his unique position between worlds. And in doing so, he had helped both his birth species and his adopted culture reach heights neither could have achieved alone. Alara, now an elderly woman but still sharp of mind, would sometimes visit the memorial that had been erected on the site where the colony ship had been destroyed so many years ago. There, among the stars her husband had died reaching for, she would look out at the thriving alliance of worlds and whisper, "He grew up strong, Marcus, just as you wanted, stronger than either of us could have imagined." And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.